Hello everyone. Today we will be talking about Boeing's 787 Dreamliner, as you can see here in the picture. This is a 787 Dreamliner from All Nippon Airline, and it really is beautiful. Here are some specs of the airplane. As we can see, it travels very long, and I've been taking this plane a couple times back and forth from US to China, and those are over 12 hours of flight. And some of the equipments on board are just the top of the line and very fancy. Here are some key partners with Boeing. Of course, investors that put the money in, and the NASA who put the technology in, and the defense sector that put the military contract which Boeing can fulfill and build their stuff. Activities that Boeing's do. Essentially, Boeing's do the research and development and manufacturing of airplanes. Pretty much any technology and science that is related to airplane, Boeing does it. And also, Boeing has developed a global and fully functioning supply chain. Resources come from government, that requires airplane travel as a major transportation method, and the military contracts that Boeing builds their weapon and fulfill the requirement. And Boeing actually employ a lot of people from all over the globe to support such a big company to make it run and make it fully functional. And one interesting thing about Boeing is that they run some of the biofuel lines so they can reduce the cost and pollution to the earth. Value propositions. So Boeing typically do airplanes. So they are, I would say, top two, maybe top one, all around the globe in their leadership in innovation in aviation area, and it is the second largest defense contractor in the world. I believe the biggest one is Lockheed Martin. And Boeing does have some tricks in his sleeve on the hybrid electric propulsion technology, which some of us may not know, but they are pretty good at it. Customer relationships. Boeing highly automate their production line and process, so it can cut cost and time. And Boeing has a lot of military secret which cannot be shared with others, and a lot of innovation going on all the time. And that's the channels, or I would say marketing business method. They do that to fulfill the contract and make money. Cost structure. So essentially, any technology and science, you need to put a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of man-hour labor into all those area to be top of the line. Of course, research and development and manufacturing and logistics. Parts and components are sometimes made by Boeing themselves, and sometimes the supplier of parts all around the globe. And also they maintain and repair the devices, airplanes, that is in using by all kinds of organizations, including army and airlines. Revenue. They have long-term contracts, they have short-term contracts, and they do licensing, and they sell their planes to make money, and they also sell their services to make money. Pretty much a lot of stuff is based on we what we mentioned before. So here's the organization chart of Boeing. You can see there's a CEO and which is a chairman, and there are presidents, I would say vice presidents of uh, all those related substructure department. Here's the list of the department that has a senior vice president, and each department has one, which is called a matrix structure. So all those departments work together to make Boeing sustain the best player in this game. So what are some of the major players in the game? First of all, we have, you know, commercial airplane. That's what Boeing does. And some of the players in the game include the United Aircraft Corporation. I think is from either Russia or Ukrainian, and Comac from China, Mitsubishi Aircraft from Japan, and the Airbus Group from Europe. You know, the rest four of them are typically just not big players. They offer other solutions, including smaller airplanes, Cessnas, and those commercial flights that are relatively less comparable to the size of Boeing. And this picture is the Airbus A380 from Air France. As you can see, this Airbus is a really big one, and it is typically brought up to the competition with Boeing directly all the time. And it looks pretty good too. And in the defense and security department, as we mentioned before, Boeing is the second largest military contractor in the world, which of course they will have some other players in the defense department, and one of them, the most famous one I would say, is Lockheed Martin. We call them Lomar in China sometimes for short, and some of the stuff are really just the best. And we have General Dynamics, which invented and manufactured A-12 and F-16 and F-111, and Northrop Grumman, which invented the F-14 Tomcat, the expensive yet very advanced one. And we have Mitsubishi Aircraft, which is also the competitor in the commercial airplane line, which they adopted the technology and design from F-16 and made their own F-2. And of course, we have BAE, which supply us the Europe with the Eurofighter Typhoon. Here is the picture of Mitsubishi F2. As you can see, it is based on the design of F-16, and it is gorgeous. And since Boeing also manufacture and design and supply others with the engine components, here's some competitor in the engine parts and the other parts competition, which is GE Aviation, Safran, Rolls-Royce, which is pretty big in making engines, and Bombardier. This in the picture is a Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 engine on a 787, which had trouble because some of the supply chain disaster and design defect. This picture shows some of the international suppliers of the airplane by component. As you can see, we see a lot of names mentioned above in the major competitors. Of course, they are competitors, but they work together to get the job done and offer us the Dreamliner. In the US, we have Boeing, Spirit, GE, and Goodrich, which Goodrich mainly helps with the landing gear, tires specifically. And in Asia, we have Fuji, Mitsubishi, Kawasaki. In Japan, those are heavy industry competitors, and KLASD from South Korea. And from Europe, we have those players, and those are the suppliers of components for 787 Dreamliner. The supply chain management, as you can see, this is a picture that offered by Boeing's website about the critical operational readiness. So essentially, you can see it's a circle that one step goes to another and have the stuff ready. Essentially, it is a chain which no component can exist without the support of other components. And about the 787 Dreamliner, some say is a project management failure. But how did it fail? Because Boeing's intention was to cut cost. So they were trying to use some new materials to save weight and fuel, and using some unproven manufacturing methods, and outsourced a lot of work, like exceptional amount of work to unexperienced partners, which were then proven to be not ready. And of course, they relied too much on the people that were not familiar enough with the supply chain. Here's the risk factor analysis table that you can see what the risk factor was and how Boeing was trying to solve it, and why it was caused. Across the board, you can see pretty much it was led by the fact that they used way too many new stuff, new material, new process, new factory, and new people. And they somehow managed to patch the stuff, the holes that the other suppliers punched, and they actually didn't do too bad. And here's the strategy of the risk factors, continuing from the last slide, and that's Boeing's strategy. In the history, Boeing know what he's doing, and then just this time they played big and somehow got into trouble. Not too much trouble, but some trouble nonetheless. And this is the strategy they try to mitigate the risk that can lead to the failure of the plane and the project. Here's some alternative strategy that I think is probably worth discussing on the risk factors that were mentioned above, and that is the potential risk effect if the risk factors were handled with the alternative strategy. So, how actually did Boeing fail, and what's the result? So the result was they delayed in delivery couple times. They promised to deliver the airplane and the services included couple times, and they figured out they couldn't do that. There were just way too much trouble, and they have to solve it. And they did couple times, so it was delayed in delivery, and they had to redo a lot of stuff, and to, like I said, patch the holes that were punched by the suppliers that were not so familiar with the project. And probably the Boeing wasted more money and resources and time than they could have been saved by just using the traditional method. But it's only a if, and we cannot always just rely on old stuff. We have to innovate sometime. And I personally I would say 787 the plane are just good planes. There were not a lot of and there were not a lot of tragic events unlike the new ones, and overall the I would say the reputations were good because Boeing really didn't want to fail, even though the project itself has some problem. The end result, the planes were just fine. And how and what can we learn from it? Which is the probably the biggest thing. That here's a list of things that we can learn from the this project. Probably part of it, and those are just some aspects that we can possibly learn. And we make mistakes all the time, but we can still learn from them. you know like I always said, you have to realize you will not always be lucky, and when you are not, you can mess up big times. Okay, here are some of the state of the art technology that Boeing said they did pretty good on. Which on the system parts, the plane was pretty smooth, and it was the first to introduce the large and dimmable windows. I remember from what they say, the the windows are about like a quarter larger than the original ones, and they deployed more electric systems than ever, like more than any other models that they have deployed before. And they have electric brakes and electric wing eyes protection, which it is really a big thing. On the aero part, they introduced aluminum flow nacelles to reduce the resistance from air. When you're traveling very fast, there's a lot of resistance in the air, which make you cost more fuel, and it is quieter to ride than the previous models because of the low noise chevrons. And the last one is low drag empennage, which reduce the cost of fuel. Here's the picture of uh, the makeup of the plane, which a big part is the advanced composites, which are a pretty much new thing in the airplane. We used to manufacture planes with aluminum, titanium, and steel. Now 50% of the whole airplane is made out of plastic. And novel technology, the VFSGs and high power electrical system enables a lot of entertainment system that was not there before, and they were just better in pretty much all aspects. And they also introduced the new electronically powered spoil actuators, which is safer and somehow simpler and more effective and less risky. Good news, bad news. Good news, of course. The plane is made out of 50% of the composite, which is never done like this before, and a lot of features are only enabled by using plastic, and because plastic is more corrosion and fatigue resistant, it is less likely to fail during the fatigue that can cause the components to break and eventually tragic events happen. I mean, less of them due to the technology, and it is lighter, so 20% more fuel efficiency in its size class, meaning it is cheaper to fly. You can get a ticket from same route, same distance for less money, and because it saves money, saves more fuel, the routes that can be flew longer. I mean, all across the globe, and reached some place that were never being able to be reached before in one run. And of course, more room for everybody, more room for luggage, and because the higher pressure and humidity system, it feels uh, lower on the altitude, 20,000 feet to be exact, lower. So it is like more comfortable, and you can ride longer. And bigger windows and simultaneous darkening and lightening by attendants, so we don't have to like push a button and wake up everybody on the plane. You can do it individually and by the flying attendant. Certifications and conclusions. Here are some, supplier visits from, across the US and the entire Earth. And that's the report from the Department of Transportation and FAA, which they think it is pretty legit plane. And on the FAA's report, they said 787 met the expectations in most areas. Although there are issues there and here, but they were not big ones, and they wish Boeing to continue the development on 787 and make it safer and better. So the overall grade is a pass, and the FAA, think it is a good one. I mean, me personally, I think it's a good one. I've been taking it a couple times, and it feels good to ride that airplane. And here are the references and citations.